People are confusing, but the most confusing people are women. You see, in today's society, women have just this inherent quality that makes them really confusing, but at the same time can also make them really smart. And usually, these really smart women happen to be in places of power, whether it be in a job, in a friend group, or even at home. I feel like I myself have a right to say this because I have somebody like that at home, who just so happens to be my mother. See, my mother has always been she's always been a polite person to me. She's always made sure to be polite to others, no matter how she thinks about them. To she does. She's always made sure to not let others walk over herself, and to always stay strong in the face of adversity. My mother's life lessons have taught me a lot, and I don't really know I don't know what type of person I would be without them. Starting off with my mother's first to my mother's wise guides to life is being polite. You see, when you work in retail for 20 years, especially Walmart out of all places, really toxic environment, it's very hard to be polite to others. And my mother knows that. But she's always devoted herself to being polite to others no matter how she thinks about them, even if they've said mean things to her in the past. And I myself take this to heart as well, because there's a dozen people I can think of right now that I could say a lot of rude things to, but I would rather not, because one, it's not a good idea, and two, it's not polite. Although being polite is important, sometimes people are just impossible to be polite to, and sometimes you just gotta be, rude. So in addition to being polite, sometimes you gotta be rude, which is why my mother always emphasized putting value into yourself. One example from my mother's life of putting value into her own life is when she was in high school. There was one day a boy making fun of her and her father, who just so happens to be my grandfather, obviously. And when she had a chance to confront him about this, instead of saying nothing or just walking by and doing absolutely nothing, or even just saying, "Hey, can you not do that?" she promptly beat him up. Now, going off of this, hear me out, it's not a good idea to beat people up, especially just because they said a rude thing, but sometimes it is important to make sure that you don't want people to be rude to you. So sometimes you might have to throw a punch or two, just to get that point across. Although, with that being said, sometimes there are things that can happen in life that you can't just throw a punch or say something about to get through them. So that is why, with my mother's last piece of advice, staying collected in the face of adversity. When I was around 5 or 6, my grandfather passed away. Being that I was so young, I didn't really have many memories with him, but the ones that I did were always very fond and lighthearted. My mother herself took this a lot worse than I did, to the point of which she didn't like to talk to people for a while, and even though she didn't talk to many people, she still talked to me. She told me 2 things that have stayed with me since. One, life is only temporary, and we must cherish it while we have it. And 2, bad things always happen. Sometimes you just gotta get through. I always go back to those 2 ideals, no matter what, even if I'm just having a bad day, or if I'm having an amazing day. Because, there's always something that you can have during your day that you might not like. So even if it's just, I have a bad soccer match, or I disagree with somebody about that, I always think of those 2 things and how they mean everything to how I deal with issues. The life lessons my mother have taught me have influenced my life in an insanely important way, and I don't know what type of person I would be without them. Coming back to those 2 things, my mother has always emphasized being polite to others no matter how you think about them, or how you've been treated by them. Or putting value into your own life no matter what others say or do to hurt you. And finally, staying strong in the face of adversity no matter how bad things get. So even though my mother has always maybe disagreed with me or argued with me or said something mean to me, or even just in general been confusing, she's always been wise.